Hey everyone, it's Jody Sutter of the Sutter Company. And first of all, I want to thank anyone who has patiently waited for us to start. We were meant to start at the top of the hour at 1 o'clock Eastern. We are experimenting with LinkedIn Live here at the Sutter Company, and we experienced some technical difficulties. So, anyway, we're here. Hopefully, what happened before, which was, I think we just basically, I think StreamYard or LinkedIn just decided that broadcast was over. Maybe we weren't interesting enough. I find that hard to believe, though. But thank you all for being here, and if you're watching the recording, thanks for tuning into that. So here's the deal with this LinkedIn Live series. What I wanted to do is I wanted to take what I do in my video series, Just Ask Jody, which, as many of you know, is when I take a question from an agency around an issue they're having with business development and I answer it in 4 minutes or less. Well, today in LinkedIn Live, we're taking more like 25 minutes. And what I want to do with this series is I want to kind of move the emphasis off of me and talk to agency owners and others in the agency business who have an impact on agency business development and the success of new business operations at agencies, and talk to them about their perspectives. And I'm hoping that other agency owners, other agency folks who are participating here will be able to learn from them. So today I have got a very special guest. Her name is Kim McKeeman. She'll be joining me shortly. There she is. So hi, Kim. I'm just going to take a couple of moments to introduce you. Kim is a PR professional who has been CEO of her own PR firm, McKeeman Communications, for more than 25 years. And I'm going to refer to my cheat sheet to read you how McKeeman describes themselves. So this is McKeeman works with food and beverage companies that are experiencing rapid change or growth. These brands struggle to communicate what makes them different in new markets where they're unknown, or in existing markets that only see the national brand and not a local business. Now, there are a couple of reasons why I wanted to make sure I got this all in. One, because it's a great way to introduce Kim and the business that she runs. But the second reason is that today we're talking about agency positioning, and I think it's a pretty good positioning statement that we just read off. And we're going to talk to Kim more about how she got there, some of the struggles, what's gone well with the agency position since she launched it a couple of years ago, and how it's evolved. So before I turn it over to Kim, just full disclosure, Kim and I met when she hired me a couple of years ago to work on her agency positioning. But it has been a couple of years, and I think you probably have an interesting perspective to share. So, hi, Kim, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Jody.
Oh,
And
you're really
I
welcome.
know you said something about like maybe the LinkedIn Live didn't work because we weren't interesting enough. I beg to differ. I think that was a riveting conversation we were having. Riveting.
Yeah, fascinating. So I've chosen a pretty big topic for a small amount of time. So if it's okay, I'm just going to go launch right in.
Absolutely.
So when we first worked together, it was the spring of 2020, which many of us will remember as being like a high level COVID-19. You were already working with a lot of restaurants and a lot in the hospitality business. Tell us a little bit about what was happening back then, and how you still, like, why you doubled down on this market that you're in.
Yeah. So definitely in this, everybody can probably remember where they were spring of 2020. And it was like, anybody who had a business or was in business was trying to figure out how to stay afloat, how to get more business. And we had been working with restaurants for at that point it was 25 years. It was really our sweet spot. But then again, we had other things that we were doing at the same time. So I was Googling, much like everybody else, as fast as I could, how do I fill the pipeline? Because while we were kind of making sure our business was going to stay afloat and proceed, our restaurant businesses, our clients were doing the same thing. So it's kind of that whole, let's make sure we're servicing them, but let's make sure we've got something else just in case.
Right.
Going through the thought process of, are we too deep into restaurants? Is this for this very reason? Like, so many of them had to close their doors, had to change and do delivery or takeout or what have you. So there was just a lot of questions swirling for us. And that's when I Googled, found Jody, got a lot of your content, like filling the pipeline, all that stuff. And then we met and we
Yeah.
did what we really needed to be doing.
Yeah. Now, at that point, too, if I remember correctly, you had already decided that like restaurants were your thing.
Yes.
So But you also have, when you were, but now we're 2 years later. How has your business changed since you really landed on that positioning of not only restaurants, but this issue of restaurants that are going from sort of local or regional to more national presence?
So very interesting is probably before the pandemic, we were probably 70% restaurants. I'm going to say
Mm.
right now we are probably 95%
Wow.
restaurant, food and beverage. So it
Right.
allowed us to focus. Now, and also in terms of pursuing it, we got very, very focused. We thought, well, yeah, we kind of specialize in this. We got uber focused on it
Yeah.
because we realized this is something we're passionate about, we do really well, and we understand the industry.
Yeah.
So in terms of the change, it's allowed us to be even more focused, more energized, instead of going, well, we specialize. Like, no, we do this. This is what we're good at.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's, again, it's just allowed us to kind of get a little bit more lasered, a lot more laser
Mhm.
probably. And kind of really celebrate, like, this is who we are. And
Yeah.
honestly, we still get other inquiries. We go,
Yeah.
huh, I'm not sure if you saw our website, um, which is fine. And they're like, no, no, we saw it, but this is what we liked about it. But and we'll look at those for sure.
Yeah, so that's an interesting, I'd love to explore that a little bit. How often, or can you think of an example recently where you got an inquiry from a prospective client outside of the restaurant category that you had that conversation with, like, well, we don't really work in your category, and they said it doesn't matter. We like what you're saying about the restaurant category, and here's why it fits with us.
Yes, and it's so
Okay.
interesting. So we had someone in the lumber building products industry
Yeah.
come to us, and they were like, we want to talk to you. We're talking to other agencies. We want to talk to you, and again, we are pretty upfront. Like,
Yeah.
this is great. We definitely want to talk. We just want to make sure you saw, and when we were having the conversation, that we specialize in food and beverage. And they're like, oh no, we get that. They said, in fact, what really, what they thought or knew they needed was somebody to really make their presence known. So the messaging resonated with them, where they're known in a different part of the country. They aren't known in east, in the east so much. So they needed to be known. They also knew that they need to be localized to the market, which is another part of our positioning statement. They said,
Right.
that really spoke to me. That's why we're interested in talking with you. So again, it's like, they'll not even look at the other things, but if, like, there was also a core value fit, you could tell.
Yeah.
That's always one of those things you have to get into a call to really feel it. But yeah, they basically said what you had on your website and what we saw, digitally really spoke to us.
So I'm just going to zero in on that because that's also something I really loved about what I thought you had to offer was this need that you had already seen, and I think working together we were able to sort of tease it out. This idea of these businesses who, when they go into a new market, they know they need to appeal to that market, and that there are local characteristics that, even though we're all part of the great US of A, and there's a lot that binds us as common citizens of one place, but it's different. And you're based in, I know that you're in multiple locations, but I know,
Mhm.
like, you've got offices in North Carolina and other places, but restaurant opening in Raleigh, or restaurant that's based in Raleigh, is going to be different from when they need to think about things differently if they're opening a branch in, say, Austin or Greenville, South Carolina, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that is essentially, what we do, in terms of making sure that we allow them to show up the
Yeah.
way they need to show up, and, with all of the wonderful attributes, but also making sure they can appeal to the local market. And so that is one of the things we do pride ourselves on, having
Yeah.
worked in the Carolinas and really the Southeast for so long, is we understand the nuances, between the
Yeah.
different markets, and making sure, like, well, what happened, what really resonated with folks in Texas may not be the exact same thing here in Raleigh.
Yeah.
So I think it's understanding that, and then having the clients that are comfortable enough to be vulnerable and say, well, I'm not sure that we know how to show up for folks in Eastern North Carolina or in South Carolina, and saying,
Interesting.
like, they appreciate that outsourced, kind of objective opinion.
So do you think it helps the fact that you are already communicating that on your website and through your marketing materials in some way that says like, hey, we understand that you are probably feeling a little bit anxious about moving into a new market, then it allows them to be more vulnerable. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I think so. Because it is so much about, I think that's one of the tenets, of course, of building relationships is being open enough to be vulnerable and also like, acknowledging. And I think
Yeah.
back, honestly, Jody, to some of the content that you served up to me, like, if you're an agency owner, you're probably feeling like this. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's got me to a T. And so that immediately I'm like, oh, I connect with that. Like, yes,
Yeah.
I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's feast or famine, all of those things. So, you're not used to what you're going, what folks in Eastern North Carolina are going to value,
Yeah.
beyond your point, what we all value as US citizens, but it's a little nuanced here. And some things, coming in, in a rural community in Eastern North Carolina looks a lot different.
Right.
Um,
That's so interesting. And I'm already going off track from my like well scripted questions. But, I think something that you're saying there as well is this idea of building a relationship from the first conversation, which may be an actual conversation on the phone or Zoom or perhaps email. But I'm also talking a lot to my clients about that, this idea of coming to these conversations as more of an equal. And so I may be putting your words in your mouth, but I think what I see when agencies like you define a clear positioning is that it's even psychologically as well as practically, you're coming to those conversations as a peer. And I'd love, if you agree, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how that's affected your sales conversations.
That is, and so interesting that you say that because I wrote a blog once. It was one of my favorite blogs. Like, hey, this is kind of a two-way street. Like,
Yeah.
we're each vetting each other for fit, and
Yeah.
to your point, like that makes it kind of levels makes like, oh, it's less like, oh my gosh, I've got to get this sale. It's more like, do I want this, and do they want what we have to offer? Because we acknowledge up front that not every client is the right fit for us. Otherwise, we would
Yeah.
be chasing every restaurant that's out there. But by the same token, we completely get that we are not the right fit for every client. And it's just, it's
Right.
to your point, just kind of figuring out, what are the must-haves and what questions do you ask, and what do you listen for?
So
Um,
later on today, I wonder if he's watching. I'm not going to out him by naming him, but I'm actually talking to another client of mine about getting him better at these types of conversations. So, do you have? Oh wow, I'm really going off script. But do you have a conversation? Do you have a game plan for those conversations, or is it how much of it is sort of that instinctual listening to what they're like listening to their signals versus like, okay, in this conversation, I need to take care of this.
So it's kind of interesting you say that. Like that's, I've got a team that helps me with these discovery calls.
Okay, good.
And then we have stuff that we go into up front to figure out if we want to do the discovery call. And usually everybody has a different role. So, you
Oh,
know,
interesting.
Whitney on our team has, well, I've got my list. And I'm more like, that's great. You ask those questions. I'm going to sit and I'm going to observe. And I'm going, I'm going to pepper and I'm going to, so to your point, like we kind of start out with a plan, much like you did with this LinkedIn Live. But you find something that's like interesting, like, oh, I want to
Yeah,
ask about that. Or,
right.
and so much of it for me is we want to work with folks who are passionate about what they do.
Mm,
And folks that, again, are, humble,
yeah,
but confident. So it's like they know they don't know everything, because that's kind of how we are. We know we don't know it all, and that really value people. There's
mhm,
different cues for that. But to your original question, we start with a game plan, but
yeah,
we also, so much of communication is observation and listening. And it's kind of probably the training to be a reporter. That's like you listen and then you go off on what is the most compelling or the most relevant thing.
yeah,
um, and I would say discovery calls are one of my favorite things to do, whether
yeah,
we end up working with them or not.
yeah. I want to go back to positioning for a moment, and like again, that back to 2 years ago. Um, because it's also easy to look back if it's been successful for you. It's easy to look back and go, it's been great. But what was the hardest part about actually committing yourself to that positioning? What like did it feel right? But were you also thinking like, oh gosh, like sort of yeah. What was your hesitation if there were any?
So yeah, so it is like sales and business development is a love-hate thing, right? You're like,
Yep.
it's so much fun. It is so challenging. But
Mhm.
by the same token, it's really rewarding when it works. So
Yeah.
when we got into this and like, and we were talking through the different positioning, honestly, that is probably going, oh my gosh, this feels like this is going to take us forever. And I'm just not sure that and in fact, it wasn't. It was so the frustrating part was saying, I've got to change everything that we're doing about the way
Yes.
we're doing. But
Yeah.
that wasn't the case. It was more, and I like your word, to tease, like we were able to tease out what are the important things that we need to make more clear. And so yeah, I think it was probably changing my mindset
Right.
and saying, okay, I don't have to throw everything out. Like, let's just figure out what we need to do better. And I'll tell you,
Yeah.
I had the same conversation today with my team. We had a leadership team meeting, and I'm like, okay. I kept thinking like I'm like, I realized this isn't broken. It's just we need
Yeah.
to do this, this, and this. And I think that's with sales. It's like it's not broken. You just have to continually to figure out how to up your game or get more clear, which is absolutely
Right.
what you want to do, or understand the prospect more, the buyer. I think that
Mhm.
was most fascinating where you said, like, think about what are the questions they're asking.
Yeah.
If as your the restaurant owner or the marketing person, what are those questions they're asking and probably Googling,
Yeah.
and how do you make sure you answer those? And I'm like, that's brilliant because that's exactly what I do as a business owner. I'm asking questions, I'm Googling, and I'm looking for how does somebody solve this?
Yeah.
Um, that's the flip side of the frustration, but oh my gosh, this makes complete sense and it works.
Yeah. That's really great. Yeah, I often think that, that most agency owners, and we probably did this with you, but typically when I do the workshop that we did together, I start out by asking differentiators,
Yes.
which not inevitably, but often turns up a lot of the same old, same old. It's what every agency says about themselves. And in some ways, I do it on purpose because then I will switch and I'll say, okay, let's put that aside. And now let's talk about what you know about your best clients. And it's so much easier. And they come back with real specific things, qualities or concerns. And I'm like, all right, well, this is actually where we need to focus. And let's take all those, let's go back to that differentiation exercise and think about view them through the filter of those client issues, those things that you understand so deeply, the struggles that your clients are going through. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, this is so much easier now.
Exactly. And I think and I would say that's the other thing is you made us dig deeper. Like and that is now we say, we'll say oftentimes, well, remember Jody said this, we're like, you're right. And we actually can apply it to our clients' business sometimes too, and saying like,
Oh, interesting.
what are
Yeah.
those questions? Particularly
Yes.
when we're doing B2B, which is not normally our sweet spot, but when people find us, what are those questions that your customers are asking?
Yeah.
And it's just one of those where it just kind of works, and it's all about the psychology, I guess, behind it and
Yes.
and behaviors. And then I would say one of the more challenging things is keeping up with it.
You mean, tell me
Just,
more about that.
yeah, just how, like, again, I was just reading an article that one of my team members shared where, and I'm also reading another book. I'm a big reader and just constantly researching, but saying that, LinkedIn itself has grown like
Mhm.
just phenomenally in the last 5 years. Like,
Yeah.
become a huge platform. And granted, we always use LinkedIn, but also like they call, social selling and how
Right.
important it is, and how so many times by the time a client or a prospect gets to you, they've already kind of 90% made their mind up that they need something.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
and, and I think that's the other thing. It's like, okay, well, how do I make sure I can get in there sooner
Yeah.
before they've totally decided or totally decided against it? And I think
Yeah.
that's more the keeping up with, like, because social moves fast, online moves fast. There's the beauty of it, but then as a business owner, there's also the, oh gosh, am I moving fast enough, or are we moving fast enough to make sure that we're inserting ourselves in that thought process?
Yeah. And probably, again, I'm probably leading the witness, but I believe that it's the positioning really helps you because you can go back to that and say, okay, are we being true to that? Is it still accurate for what we do and who we serve? And if so, then like, how do we allow that to inform where we need to be and how we need to change our message a little bit? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an ongoing thing again. It's that whole like that, kind of double-edged sword of sales and business development. You love it, but it's extremely challenging in a fun
Yeah.
way.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what you did do? What were the first maybe 1, 2, or 3 things that you decided like, well, now that I've got the pitch, now that I can go into a networking event and or go on Zoom and give my spiel, what were the first few things that you said, okay, now we've got to change these. These are the priorities.
Right. So definitely website was one. And that's,
Yeah.
again, we just look at like priorities on where people are finding information. Our content. And it's funny because we even had this conversation and it just continues to evolve. Like, I'm like, I don't know that we're saying restaurant enough, or I'm not sure that we're like writing to this for the
Ah,
restaurant
interesting.
client.
Yeah.
Just constantly just get better and better. But I would say website was one, our content. I mean, honestly, internally, like getting really clear with our team. And our team has grown a lot in the last couple of years, but getting really clear with them, like, hey, this is our sweet spot. Here's how we're talking about ourselves, so that like if you're talking with a client or you hear somebody like or see something, that would be a good prospect for us for these three
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah.
Uh, so it continues to evolve, Joe, just to this day where we're saying, look, ooh, we need to make sure our SEO is really honed in on restaurants or change or the services we provide.
Right, right. And you work with a great search guy who you've you've allowed me to work with a little bit too. He's awesome. I should include Tyler's information and in the notes after. I'll include it in the show notes afterwards. Although I think he's got so much business, he's probably like, no.
Great.
Yeah. But it all goes for me, it always comes back down to the positioning because how can your SEO strategy um, be effective? I mean, that's the other thing. I shouldn't say everyone, but there's this tendency, I think, to think of SEO as sort of a digital, like a technical thing. And it's
Mhm.
not, it's just really about the words, the language that you use. And so and your positioning essentially is a statement of words, AKA language. And so the more that you can take that and translate it into the stuff that's online, that's the search engines are going to pick up. It's really important.
It's all the levers. It is funny because, again, I
Yeah.
was talking with Katie this morning and saying, like, we need to be doing all the things that we're doing for our clients, like making sure we're pulling all the levers. We're making sure that content and that positioning statement shows up in all the different ways that existing clients,
Yeah.
because, that's one of our best business development techniques is making sure we're really providing great client service and but making sure that we're showing up the right way for existing clients,
Right.
prospects, with positioning and what our sweet spot is.
So how often do you feel your existing clients help to refer you to others? And is it helped by a clear positioning? Or how is it helped by a clear positioning?
Yeah, and I mean, so that's one of the things. Again, I always kind of like try to make it very real for our team,
Yeah.
because majority of what we do is servicing clients, and what generally happens is the clearer the better, the more process driven,
Hmm.
um, and just in challenging ourselves on doing a better job. The better we are at that, the more they want us to do additional work for them,
Yeah.
or they want to refer us. And so that's why it's like, okay, that's why like that's one of the best sales efforts is putting your effort into good work for existing clients. And we actually started
True.
tracking that.
Yeah.
We call one of our clients the gift that keeps on giving, because we actually brought them on right like 2 weeks before the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And we just said like we need to help them, and it was a restaurant group, like we need to help them. And since then we've gotten probably 3 or 4 referrals from them.
Yeah.
And it was, again, it all came from the right place. Like we wanted to help them. We really knew that they were in a world of hurt. But
Yeah.
by the same token, it's paid off.
They felt like you had their back, which you did because you
Yeah.
really understood what they were going through. On a slightly different note, the other thing that I'm always harping on about is if you have a clear, succinct pitch that uses human words, then it's much easier for other human beings to not only understand it, but to remember it and to repeat it.
Yeah.
And when you see some of those more vague positionings that sort of sound like everyone else and doesn't give your feeble brain enough to hook onto, it's never going to be repeated. It's going to be too painful, too hard to remember. Chip and Dan Heath have a really great, in their book, Made to Stick, they've got a really great example about what do you call them, urban myths, and how if we know the story, do you know the story of the kidney heist? About
No.
you might, well, so the story of the kidney heist, sorry everyone, we're really going off track here. It's the story goes, business person, usually a man, staying like on a business trip at the hotel bar, finishing up a drink before he's going up to bed for the night, and like attractive woman comes up to him, starts conversation, buys him a drink. Next thing he knows, he's waking up in a bathtub of ice, and on the mirror is written in lipstick, like, call 911, one of your kidneys is missing, right? Like, don't like to call 911, or there's like a cell phone attack. I don't know, they're little details, but the point is, all it takes is to hear that story once, and then you remember it and you can repeat it to others. And then I compare it to, some of the vague pitches that I've seen other agencies settle in on that talk about integrated services and client focused delivery and digital first. And it's not the kidney heist. It's not compelling. It's not repeatable. It's not memorable. It's not repeatable.
You are so right. It's so funny because and that's one of the things I would say, one of the challenges is leaving the comfort of our like jargon, right? But it's the stuff that makes people go, eh. Like, again, and I'll challenge sometimes when I hear us getting into our jargon, I'm like, nah, it just doesn't speak to me. Like, but it's about the storytelling. And
I'm totally going to steal that, leaving the comfort of your jargon. That's
yeah, and it is, you can tell, like, you feel it when you're doing it. You're like, oh, this is so boring. I don't even want to listen to myself. Like, instead get to the fun part and get to the part like they actually care about. And and you're right, talking in real human terms that people understand, not we're an integrated marketing communications agency that does X, Y, and Z. It's like, this is what we do. We help people tell stories, and we do it in this way. We do it with these people. And I think that's the beauty of what you like, again, what you helped us do is just get very, very clear and realize, we really get caught up in our own stories and our own world and saying like, oh, this is a good website. This looks really good. I'm like, wait a minute, we're not answering anything that people want to know.
Yeah.
We aren't. And then being okay to say, all right, well, let's change that. And gladly, we didn't have to throw it completely out. We were able to do some pretty significant tweaks, but yeah, you're right. It is, you've got to talk in a way that people actually care and will relate to.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad it's worked out for you. And we're coming towards the end of our half hour, and we started late. So again, thanks for anyone who is stuck with us. But maybe just the final question. So now it's 2 years later, the positioning has served you well. We are about to maybe head into a recession. And so some of your clients are not particularly, they may be more prone to the downsides of a recession. What are you thinking about evolving your positioning as you move forward? Or is it, is it good as it is, or are you thinking like, making a change, tweak?
We're always looking at how we can be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Or again, what they're thinking about, what they're telling. So again, some of our best bets are, what are our existing clients asking themselves or asking us?
Yeah.
So one is, wow, how do you prepare for a recession? Do we need to market differently? Do we market less, more? And these are some of the questions that we're hearing. And so yeah, I think it is, knowing how to approach enough of that without being the boy that cried wolf, or really getting people angsted up, but just saying like, hey, here's some recession-proof things you can do. Right. I think the other thing is obviously when we have folks that turn to us, and how that informs what we're going to do. It's having the facts too, and realizing, wow, actually in August, and I think one of my team members passed this to me yesterday, like, restaurants are doing pretty well. They're having pretty record numbers right now.
Yeah.
And so realizing that recession, if it happens, if we're in the midst of it, it hits everybody a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And basically making sure that, we're talking enough about that.
Yeah.
but realizing that the sky is not completely falling.
I mean, it's interesting because in some ways they have to, the marketers have to decide how they need to change their business model for a recession economy. And I guess the other things that we probably are always saying to our clients is like, it's not the time to ease up on marketing. If
Right.
anything, it's maybe the time to take a slightly different tack, but it's not a good time to not get the message out there, right?
Exactly. It's just, again, just every new, like COVID, post-COVID,
There's always something.
there's always something that makes you
Yeah.
continue to be more and more thoughtful and more intentional. And I think
Yes.
that's the thing that's one of the questions folks are always asking us is, how can I do more with what I've got? How can I be smarter with the resources I have? And I'm a business owner. I do the same thing. So it's human nature. But I do think, yeah, it's a challenge we're always going to have, whether it's a recession, a pandemic, a crisis situation. It's just, how do I do the best job that I can with the resources I have?
And being that you're PR focused as well, you're probably already used to like crisis communications is always a part of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes internal as much as anything else. It's making sure that, like, hey, we're going to get through this, whatever it is. But yeah, it's definitely a part of the mix.
Well, Kim, this was so much fun. I can't believe that half an hour has already flown by. I'd love to have you back on again, maybe, as your positioning evolves. And like I said, you're also always welcome to tell me, like, what, this worked and this didn't work. We may be talking 6 months from now and you're like, what, everything fell apart. Hopefully not.
I have a feeling that's not going to happen, but no, I so appreciate that. And enjoyed the conversation, because that's really what it was. And it was a delight. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you. And